Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. So today I'm going to be working on an ink and wash stained glass painting, and that would be ink lines and then watercolor washes. So thanks for parking your brushes here and let the epic art adventures begin. So I saw this stained glass window in San Francisco and it was more than 100 years old, and I was really taken by the beautiful subject and all the different colors in it, so I knew that I wanted to paint it at some point. And since I had a recent patron asking me about ink and wash pieces and how to start doing ink and wash, I thought this would be a great project to start with, because you just sort of pull everything together with your tighter ink line and then you let the watercolor wet and wet do its thing and it gives you these great effects, so it's actually easier than it looks. And for this painting I'm going to be using my Sennelier tin, the tin I put together last year. The colors in the original photo of the stained glass have a lot of these greens and yellows, so I'm probably going to end up using these 4 colors, and they also have some blues and purples, so I'm probably going to end up using a little bit of the blue and purple here too. It has all of the colors I need for this painting just on this one travel tin. I just have a 1/4 inch synthetic angle and also a wedge brush. It says size 6, but actually it's more like a size 2 or something for a round brush, and you can just use a pointed round brush. I just happen to have this out, so I'm going to be using that. There's a lot of natural borders created by all these panels, so if you don't want to do a whole sky all together and you want to do little sections to start out and it's fun and easy and soothing like coloring something for you, then this is a great project. Oh, and by the way, this is Arches hot press watercolor paper. I think the phthalo blue will make a lovely sky color, and if something doesn't spread enough, then feel free to add more water to make it spread. And the other thing, of course, is that the color in the stained glass reference, the sky, is a little bit lighter, but if I like to see that blue and I want to darken it up, then that's again my personal choice, and this is going to dry back a little bit lighter anyway. And I'm using horizontal strokes here because I can see that the cloud patterns in the reference are showing me some horizontal clouds, and so I'm just following the pattern of those horizontal lines in the reference. And again, I don't have to be a slave to that, just let it be random. So I'm just putting this down all wet on wet, so I'm using one brush, as you can see, to put down the water and my other brush to put down my paint, and it's just giving me a nice wet, bloomy, soft, cottony phthalo blue here, and I'm just going to keep doing that. And anytime I do a live audio video like this one, then I do get to talk and paint at the same time, which is nice, and it gets both things done. But you're going to end up hearing some background noise now and again, like maybe a car passing by, and hawks and turkeys and quail and scrub jays, so you might end up hearing some of those animals in the background, so that's just going to be some country ambiance that can't be helped because that's where I moved to. And it's actually very soothing for me to hear when I'm painting because it doesn't make me feel like I'm hanging out by myself. I've got a whole, little animal family outside just hanging out, living their lives and having fun. I really like posting videos to YouTube because I feel like it does do something of a community service, especially as I hear from a lot of people who say they can't afford to pay for something like art classes. What would really be great is if I could make it affordable to everybody by having $1 patrons only, because I think everybody can afford $1 a month, but I'd need a whole lot more of them. So instead of having a handful of $7 patrons, if I had a ton of $1 patrons, then I could just get rid of the $7 tier. Right now, because I only have like about 50 patrons, I have to continue to do a $7 tier with all the perks, but hopefully maybe one day in the future I can reward all these people who loyally stuck to me on Patreon from the beginning and make it go down to $1 for all the same perks if I can just get enough patrons on there. I've taught more than 1,000 students in various subjects in person, and those are not online students, those are in-person students that I taught in calculus or history and also in art. And I noticed that for any of these subjects, if you tell people that they can rely on something as a crutch, whether it's a flashcard showing formulas or an exam that has more multiple choice rather than long form answers, or if it's a drawing or painting situation where you can use more tracing, that people tend to, just because people like to take the shortcut, to never really develop the memory to have something where it's not going to be a flashcard if it's a math formula, or not memorize a lot of the facts that they need to memorize for a history exam, or not develop their freehand drawing skills if they are given the choice to trace. So I've found that at least for the classes I taught, I would tell students, okay, once you get past a certain amount of drafting, then you can use tracing to speed stuff up. But I'm going to have to make you develop your drafting to a certain extent before you have that as an option, because I know that it's a nice tool to speed things up. But if you never develop your freehand drawing skills, then you're going to be stuck when you're painting in some situations, or you cover up a drawing and you don't know how to draw it because you didn't learn how to draw it. So you're going to have trouble drawing with your paint and also drawing with your pencil if you're always just relying on tracing. Some people have different personalities, so they're perfectly able to freehand draw sometimes and trace sometimes and go along with both. But for the most part, I found that I actually had to make them do the drawing part, otherwise they just wouldn't practice it. So I think that's really my only concern with the tracing. It's not that it's not a helpful tool, and it's definitely very helpful if you need to speed stuff up, but I think it's just a worry that it can become a crutch and you don't learn your freehand drawing skills if you don't give that enough time and attention. People have been asking me that recently for whatever that's worth, you know? So if it's a personal goal of yours to have more freehand drawing skills so that you can, use them for your drawing and you can also use them for your painting, then you can do that more. And if you don't have as much interest in that, or don't have the time or the health, or it's not of interest to you to have such strong drafting skills, then yeah, then you can trace more. And different people have different opinions. So everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and that's totally okay. My personal opinion is that try to develop both if you can, because that would be the best for you, is if you could freehand draw and also use tracing as an effective tool when you need to for speed and efficiency. But it is a shortcut tool, and sometimes you should make sure you can do something without that shortcut, whether it's memorizing some calculus formulas or history that you're learning, or freehand drawing. All of those things, you need to know the long and the short of it, depending on what your skill set needs to be developed too. Try to develop your freehand skills as much as possible. They will help you draw, they will help you ink, they will help you paint. So if you are a new patron and you don't know where to start, then just take some time to either draw or trace and transfer the drawing that I provided, and then after you've got it all inked up, then you can come back in and have a very simple technique of wet and wet give you some very compelling and realistic stained glass effects here. Painting something that has beautiful soft blends in it, and it's also got something like a lead soldered lining. That's very convenient, because then you can just go ahead and do your drawing like I did for this window that I saw, and then ink it up. And once it's all inked up, you can go ahead and just do all of your washes wet on wet, and it's a very soothing and easy project because you have your ink lines pulling the whole piece together. But the end result is very impressive. We've done this before with a stained glass peacock, a Tiffany peacock painting. We also did it with stained glass butterflies, also from an old Tiffany reference, and probably a few other projects here and there that I've shown. Black marker to do your stained glass outline effect, and then to come back with a watercolor or with an ink or any of the colors of your choice to do wet and wet to create the stained glass color panels effect. And for this, because I'm going to be adding all of my water and washes of color later, and I want this to stay put, I do want to make sure that I'm using a waterproof black marker and not a marker that's going to run, because while that's a lovely runny ink effect that I might like for something else, I'm not going to like it for something like this at all. I want the lines to stay put. And I am going to be putting the longer version of this, that's close to real time, up for patrons on Patreon in place of Skillshare videos in the future. So they'll be just getting that as a perk along with the other stuff that I'm posting on Patreon, like the sketches, the Q&As, the deconstructed painting posts. I'll be sharing part of this demo publicly on YouTube, and it's going to be more than 20 minutes, so there's a decent amount of information here. But if you want to see an in-depth, leisurely, close to real-time version with lots more information and instruction, you can access the full video link via my Patreon. Private free passes to all these newer, longer YouTube videos and tutorials, and my previous Skillshare tutorials, along with many other info-dense, deconstructed art and Q&A posts and sketch downloads, are always available for my $7 patrons on Patreon. it'll actually be easier to find some of these pieces once I get the cattails and the cattail leaves and stuff in, so that's perfectly fine to move on. I don't have to get every last snippet of sky, so I'm gonna let it dry completely before I get to the cattails. And while we're waiting, let's work on the border up there that has those beautiful grape leaves and the grapes up there. You just have to do wet and wet random effects for all the different small shapes, and you just do all the hard work and the ink drying from the beginning, and after that you can have all your fun. Okay, so in this case I was doing wet on wet with putting water onto the white paper and using the white paper as a highlight, and then putting in the blue, the phthalo blue, for the sky so that we have clouds and sky. In this case, because these are going to be leaves, I'm going to end up putting down some yellow paint, and I think the yellows that I can see here in the stained glass reference include the yellow light and the quin gold, and I see a little bit of green too, and then I see a darker forest green, so I'm going to end up using all 4 of these colors to do the grape border. I have a little dropper like this, and I'm just going to use it to drop some water into these colors that I want to make wet. So I'll go over to my water cup. That's the clean water cup, not the mixing water. So I've got clear water, and I'm going to put it onto the yellow, the green, the quin gold, and also the forest green, because those are the colors I'm going to be using. So I'm going to make sure they're all nice and wet and ready for me to use. And because these are honey-based colors made by Sennelier, these pans are really easy to wet. You just have to get them wet and they sort of jump right onto your brush, which is something that I love. So let's go ahead and put the yellow in here. And it's a very rich, deep yellow, as you can see. And that's going to dry out relatively fast, faster than the blue, because it's got less water in it. So what I'm going to do is, while it's wet here, I'm going to quickly come back in with my quin gold and other colors that I might need, and just do the quin gold and this yellow. Kind of like where it's going and puddling on the bottom, so I think I'm going to be okay with that actually. If you like a shape where the paint puddles, even if it's at a tilt and that's not how you planned it, if you like the shape, then leave it that way. Again, this is all about random blooms, so don't really look at the reference for anything except for what the colors are you're using. Just let the watercolor do its thing. So more yellow right here, more quin gold. Even though these are tiny sections, you want it to be loose and free and going wherever it wants to go within these sections for those lovely stained glass effects. And I can see that there's a little bit of green at the bottom section there, so I think I might toss in some of that green here, and it's a thicker color so it doesn't want to move as much, so you can come back and tap at it with the brush with the yellow in it to get it to move around a bit more. I can see a little bit of green over there too. Just tap, 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 and let it disperse a bit more. These thicker colors, ones that have more opacity to them, are going to have a bit more difficulty dispersing. Just because they're thicker, they'll spread less fast than something that's a thinner color, so you just help it a bit by tapping at it. And of course this paper is at a tilt, so gravity is also going to help it. Drop in my green, try to soak up some of the water puddling here, and then come back with the green. If you have an area where you're putting in wet on wet and the color just doesn't take, it gets just completely diluted, then your problem is too much water. And if you have an area where you're putting wet in and the color won't spread, then your problem is too little water. So depending on whether or not it's spreading, it's just a water issue. Okay, so I'm really liking that, and I'm just going to continue to do that for all of those leaves and the same wet and wet process. I always go light to dark, so I'm doing all the yellow and greenish leaves first, and we're not going to come back and do the darker forest green colors or the grapes till later. And I really love the variation. I love how it goes from yellow and the quin gold that gives it more of an orange bias, and then towards the lime green, and then towards an outright yellow green when it melts into the yellow green colors. Movement here, that's analogous from the warm yellow to a yellow green. Anytime I'm feeling stressed out, a great way to sort of just calmly enjoy doing watercolor painting is some ink and wash. I do feel like with the other types of watercolor painting that I have to draw with my brush, right? You're doing so much of that freehand drawing that I was talking about, right, with your paintbrush when you're doing a drawing that has no ink lines at all. Versus with this, I got all of my freehand drawing and all my sketching and inking out of the way. And now I'm just interested in doing the color shapes. And all these color shapes are all very wild and free, wet and wet. So it's just a very soothing way to spend an afternoon is doing an ink and wash painting. And stained glass is very stylized, so it's not very realistic, so it adds that further aspect of, I think, simplicity to doing an ink and wash piece, is that you don't even have to worry about it being realistic. It can be so random. Something like this is very easy. It's not like it's a person or an animal. You can take a lot more license and skewing things and adding things if it's a botanical piece, and for a stylized botanical piece like this that's stained glass, you have even more liberty to do that. I also wanted to announce that I'm going to be posting my videos on Thursdays from now on. I used to post on Fridays, and I tried just briefly, informally, without telling anybody, posting on Mondays. That seemed like it really threw off my schedule for posting. You know, the weekend gets in the way. So I'm actually going to post on Thursdays from now on. I think that'll make it easier for me because it'll make it so that I can still have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to take care of errands and chores and other stuff at home, and I can have Monday through Thursday as a work week instead of Monday through Friday, which is going to make it a little bit easier for me. And I think Thursday's just going to be a better day to post because hopefully there'll be less traffic of art videos being posted on a Thursday in general. Hope you enjoyed this stained glass subject, which we accomplished by ink and wash, and that was a waterproof ink line with a marker and the watercolor washes to give us that great luminous transparent stained glass effect. If you want to watch the whole video demo for this project with lots more information and instruction, you can access the full private video link via my Patreon. Well, wizards, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and comment on this tutorial and check out my website dashboard for easy access to all my online platform links on a single page to support my art creation and instruction. Thanks for parking your brushes here and wishing you all fantastical ink and wash adventures.